Hello, welcome to this week's Tarah Talks. I'm so excited to have the amazing Miss Destructo, Amber Osborne, available to us today for your love and delectation. She's amazing. She is the CMO of Meshfire, an awesome startup here in Seattle, and she's going to talk with us today about personal branding. So we will have a quick conversation first, and then maybe take a few of those questions. Amber, you're amazing. Tell us why.
Let's see. Tell us why I'm amazing. Actually, I have a very interesting story, and I mean, it really does involve a lot of personal branding, I guess you would call it, but mostly it's just a bunch of stories that make me who I am. So I started off in the whole social media sphere, actually promoting sweet potatoes. My first social media gig was promoting sweet potatoes, and that all happened through just networking on Twitter when Twitter first came out. Mm-hmm. And that happened. My background is actually in the music business and music promotion. So I was working with bands, and then I was working with yams. And then I just recently moved out to Seattle from Tampa, Florida, make the crazy hike across country, 3,000 miles, and for a startup, which everybody was like, why are you doing this for? It's for a startup. Okay. But I've been here for about 2.5 years now, and I really wouldn't change anything.
That is wonderful. So we'll get a little more into what is personal branding and why would you do it, and is it okay to do it? Are you a terrible person if you do it? And a little bit more after that. So what I want to remind everybody right now is that you can, as we are talking, and ask questions in the question and answer application inside this Hangout, and the community can vote them up or vote them down depending on what they want to see Amber answer. You can also send those questions to my Twitter account @Tarah. It's right here below, and I will send them along to Amber. So can you tell us a little bit more about what makes someone good at personal branding without being a terrible person?
I think there's a lot of like mystery around the phrase personal branding, because I think a lot of people just kind of they don't get it wrong, but they kind of jump into it thinking like, oh, I need to do this, this, and this, and I need to promote myself, and I just need to keep on promoting myself, and that usually doesn't work because it's inauthentic. Mm-hmm. Again, a lot of how I just built up my personal brand as Miss Destructo, I guess you would call it, was just through telling my stories. I just have a weird life, so people just kind of was like, hey, that's really awesome, but kind of inspirational, and you're kind of a badass, and it's having influence without being, I think, too over the top, being relatable. So I think a lot of people get scared off by personal branding just because they've tried it and it's failed for them, or they're just not comfortable sometimes with talking about themselves. So I think there's a lot of challenges in personal branding, but at the same time, the people that do pull it off, one of the main things I usually tell people is go and find those people in either your communities or whatever kind of industry you're in, the ones that have really kind of pulled it off, and just kind of take bits and pieces, maybe see how they're doing it, or just ask them. I mean, I get asked all the time, and I love helping people out with that because I know it's such a challenge, and sometimes it just happens. Like, I didn't really know that I was going to become like Miss Destructo. It was just like a moniker I had, and then one time when I was at an airport and I still had bright blue hair, I had someone yell across the airport, "Miss Destructo!" And I'm like, don't say that in an airport. I guess that's when you know that you kind of like made it, is when you almost get tackled by TSA. So it definitely does have its challenges. So
I would be willing to bet. One of the things that I see people, especially women, really struggling with is, I'll give you an example of some. I'm not going to mention a name, but I've recently been talking to someone who is an amazing, stunning person, clearly an expert in her field, and she and I have been working together on some stuff. And one of the things that we've been talking about is how she feels very uncomfortable promoting herself because she feels like she wants to be seen as an expert in her field, but no matter how many people tell her she's an expert, she's amazing, and that she's awesome, she doesn't feel like that expert yet, and she's very uncomfortable putting herself out there as that person. So I guess, can you talk about not just how to do like your current branding, but how do you be aspirational in the way that
again, it's tough because even now, after doing this for so many years, I still feel kind of like an imposter. Like people will call me an expert, or I'll get featured in something, and I'm just like, are you sure? Like, are you sure about that? And some of the ways that I tell people to get around it, because I get asked about that a lot. Like, hey, people call me an expert, but I don't. How do I do this without promoting myself all the time? And I tell them, I'm like, look, there's awesome things and awesome resources available on the internet, like tweet chats. I tell people to get involved in tweet chat, so that way they can become an authority without, being too in somebody's face. They can actually jump into the conversation. I think the more conversational you are with people, instead of just like, tweeting out stuff all the time, going, hey, listen to me. If it's more conversational, then people start looking up to you for advice, or they come back to you and ask you questions about things. So, I mean, it is really tricky, but once you start getting to the point of where people are, I think when people start coming to you and asking you for advice, I think that's when you realize, like, okay, maybe I've hit that point of where I need to start focusing a little bit more on helping others. And I find that's actually a way that people build their personal brand, is just by helping others more.
I love that notion that you can feel. I've seen a lot of women circle around that too, the path to becoming an expert by helping people, which helps them promote their, okay, this is weird. This is sort of something that I do too. It's really kind of uncomfortable to talk about. This is really an uncomfortable topic for a lot of people.
It is for me. It definitely is.
It is. I teach a class called Transitioning to Tech for Disadvantaged Folks, and I try to help them. Here's how you get into the bottom rungs of the tech ladder, QA, web tester, stuff like that. And climb your way up. And I'm teaching this class on it. I'm teaching people how to get in tech, but I feel weird about the fact that I am saying that publicly, like I'm taking credit for something.
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you? What do you say about that?
It's very interesting, especially in the tech industry, because I've had people that I've looked up to, call me an expert or call me a guru, and it just feels weird. It doesn't feel. I don't feel right in those clothes. However, I think it means more to me when, say, someone that I know, like for you, example. You go and you teach people. I think it's when I hear from somebody who needs help, and not like an expert in the industry or anything like that, just somebody that I'm helping, and they're like, hey, look, you've really helped me out, like you're an expert in this. That's when I kind of feel better about doing what I do. I'd rather be called, an expert by someone, just anybody, rather than, like, I don't know, Forbes or whatever. I mean, it's a different level and a different feeling. And I usually just deal with it just by asking other people I know, like, hey, so are you sure they got this right? And they're like, yeah, here's the data. I'm like, oh, yay, data, woohoo. But
I think you were called one of Forbes magazine's top 50 CMOs in the country last year.
Yeah, it was weird.
When do you finally get that expert status?
I think that's when I finally went, well, I made it to this point. Let's see what else I can do. Because I would rather leverage those titles and use it for something good rather than just like hang it over my head or put it on my Twitter bio like, hey, I'm an expert, or I was like top 50 CMOs, and I'd rather use that to be like, hey, I was a top 50 CMO. Let me come and teach your class at whatever college, or rather than use it for, my absolute personal gain. I'd rather help other people when I get any kind of like recognition like that, definitely.
Okay. No, it's a tough situation to be in, because it's not just that we have this internal pressure to to not promote ourselves. I feel like there's a lot of external pressure.
Oh, definitely.
Society not to be a woman who's a loudmouth, and I get a lot of pressure coming at me. Don't say that you're those things because we'll disapprove of you. We disapprove of the fact that you put the word leader in your Twitter bio. Well, that's
right.
What I aspire to be. It's what I am, clearly. Yeah. And yet I'm not allowed to claim that in public. So that's, how do you respond to kind of external pressure to not be a noisy female?
I make more noise, usually, and then they're like, shut up. But that's just how I am. But I mean, I've ran into certain situations, for example, like getting speaking gigs. Mm-hmm. And I'll go and I'll look at maybe some of the other people that they've already chosen, and I'm just like, oh, well, these people kind of talk about what I talk about, and so I'll send them over, what I've done, my accomplishments and everything, and they're like, oh, well, you haven't written a book yet, or you haven't done this yet, and I'm like, are you serious, really? So sometimes I really feel that there is a lot of external pressure, to have certain accomplishments, even like writing a book, or having some kind of, and you could do anything else. Like you could, cure cancer, and it'd still be like, yeah. Hey, you haven't written a book about it yet. And it's like, oh,
you haven't written a book. Oh God, I know, I get it. Before we open this up to questions, and I've got, I've got 6 or 7 here already. Questions that people have asked me. Some of them privately, just amazing. There was something that you and I started talking about, and it has to do with how you put time into your personal branding.
Yeah.
You and I both get hit, I think, a lot with that can I take an hour of your time and buy you a cup of coffee and tell you, and make this connection with you. So how do you personally deal with that notion that someone comes to you, and I feel like there's a little bit of a gender thing going on there too.
I have
time's worth $5.
I would if they came to me and was like, hey, so I just bought you a Jimmy John's sandwich and it's on its way, I'd be like, yeah. It feels like that. It's very impersonal, but I get requests all the time that are like, hey, can you meet me up for coffee? And I'm just kind of like, okay, cool, let's talk about business or whatever. And it just feels weird. It feels weird because I feel like my time is a lot more valuable than just a cup of coffee, but how do I say that without sounding rude? On the other end of the spectrum, I have, just as a woman and as a founder, there's been some times where I know that they want more than coffee, okay,
yeah.
Yeah, it's that. Exactly, and the thing is, like, I'll wear my ring, and it's just it doesn't work sometimes. They just don't get it, and or what I love is when they contact me for an issue that is maybe my CEO would be better to handle, and I say, oh, maybe you should go talk to my CEO about this, and then they're like, yes, but I want to talk with you, and I'm like, no, I see what you're trying.
You want to, yeah, okay.
I see what you're trying to do, but no, thank you.
Well, there's 2 elements to what we're talking about right now, and one is this feeling like you want to give, but you also recognize how much time you have to put into it.
Yeah.
And I feel like my policy is I do favors, I don't take coffees. If you just tell me what you want, I'll tell you immediately if I can help you or not. Yeah. Most of the time when people want coffee, they don't just want coffee, no matter what the situation is. They want me to help with their
free advice, or or they want a whole business plan like written out for them, and it's like, okay, I'm not going to give you strategy, like that you have to pay for that, and that's where
it is okay to say that your time is worth something you've put a lot of time and effort and energy into it.
Right. And that's usually where I'll draw the line at, is being like, look, I'm not going to do a business plan for you or a complete strategy. If you want to talk further about this, then let's set a proposal up or do something a little bit more formal than just having a coffee. Or sometimes I'll throw it back at them and just be like, hey, well, you seem like a very busy person. Like, why don't we do this instead? And try to funnel it into something a little bit more than just a coffee. Or, you can definitely tell sometimes when people they have ulterior motives, or they're just trying to get advice for free.
Well, let's go to the other side of this too, which is it could very easily, and I'm already going to get some stuff about this, it could very easily sound like what we're doing is we're complaining about an extremely high-class problem
Right.
that people want our attention. And the issue here is more about making sure that when you go ask somebody for their time and effort and energy to help with part of your personal branding, your character development, it's about you making really good choices about how to approach that person and what they care about.
Yeah.
So we're showing you hopefully how to get to the point where you have people coming to you and asking you to come work for them, where you have people coming to you. So the way that you get there is a lot more respect than people sometimes show when it comes to asking for other people's time.
Oh yeah. And the thing is, I always approach it, especially on the other end, of just thinking about other people's time as well. And again, just flipping the situation around and just being like, hey, well, you seem like a very busy person. Maybe we should find other ways to do this, because it happens not a lot, or it happens a lot, especially in the startup world, because a lot of startup founders want to meet with other startup founders, and you're just like, you already know the relationship's not going to work, kind of thing. But how do you say that?
Yeah, you don't ever want to be rude to somebody, and that's kind of the problem, because you're telling someone no in the nicest possible way, and that is a strong thing to be able to do. So, yeah, I think we have several questions already here. Got a couple.
Fantastic.
Q&A here, so that's awesome. So let's go ahead and move over to this part. And again, if you've just joined us, there's several new people in the Hangout. Please do ask questions in the Q&A application and vote up the ones that you want to see answered first. And you can always ask me via the Twitter handle that you see right there. Okay. So one of the first questions I have for you is, there it is. It's closely related to what we were just talking about how do you get to that point where you have people coming at you. And so I guess I would say that the best translation of this is, how do you specialize appropriately so that you become an expert in a niche as opposed to just kind of generally known?
Yeah, one thing that I always tell people, I'm like, especially when you're trying to do personal branding, step outside of your industry. I tell, because a lot of people think, well, I need to go to all of the networking events in my industry. I need to do this, this, and this, all in their industry. But I'm like, yeah, but then you're one among many that specialize in what you do. Some of my best clients that I've ever had in the past were because I went to events and I went to things outside of my industry where I was the only person who specialized in doing social media or social media consulting, and people were coming to me as the expert. Now, if you go to a conference where there's a lot of other social media people there, of course, all of your competition's there, so it makes it a little difficult. So I always tell people, go outside of your industry, and you can even do it online too. Sometimes I'll jump into different different chats or different conversations going on Twitter that have nothing to do with my industry, and then people find out what I do, and they're like, oh, I've been looking for somebody like you. So it's an easy way to specialize and kind of become an authority. It is just getting out of your industry every once in a while.
Okay. I've got a very specific, that's awesome. I've got a very specific question here, which is a great one, and it is from a young woman who would like to know, what is the best channel to use? She's coming out of school as a developer. She wants to know, does she develop her community on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn? What's the place she needs to pick to start?
I really like Facebook groups. Some of the Facebook groups that I'm involved in is like community managers and social media managers, and I just learned so much from these people that are even way beyond some of the things that I do. So it's a great place to not only network, but it's a great place to find out, especially if you're just getting out of college, like what the requirements for those jobs are going to be. Another thing to do is on LinkedIn or on Twitter, maybe even find recruiters before you get out and just let them know, like, hey, I'm about to get out of college or I'm about to get out of school. I'm looking to do this, this, and this. You can learn from them, and also, they might think of you for a job. It's just an easy way to build up relationships with those people that you need to meet. But again, Facebook groups are awesome, especially for those specialized communities like that. And a lot of the times the conversations, they'll even go offline. I've met people at conferences that I've talked to in the Facebook groups and stuff. So.
Okay. Beautiful. Facebook group sounds like a great answer.
Yeah.
It's a smaller group and you can get into it and have those conversations. Okay. Okay, so I promised you there wouldn't be too many hardballs. This is a hardball. Blogging, worth it or not?
Oh, man, I've actually written blog posts about how much I hate blogging.
That's meta. Stop it.
Yeah, I know. But when I first started, just trying to network and trying to get out there, especially online, I think in like 2007, 2008, I started blogging because that's what everyone was doing. And it was just a great way for me to tell my stories beyond 140 characters on Twitter. But then I kind of fell out of love with it. The romance wasn't there anymore. The spark wasn't there, and it was hard to keep up content, hard to keep up good ideas. And then finally, one of my friends, Scott Stratton, who has this awesome blog on marketing, he told me, he's like, look, write when you're passionate because you're going to have better blog posts, and more people are going to read it. Write when you actually feel like it. So sometimes I feel like blogging is worth it because, especially for me, it's kind of a portfolio, I would say, of what I've done and what I've accomplished, and it's an easy way for me to share my stories. But at the same time, like, trying to just keep up a blog is sometimes just really it's hard to do, especially on your own.
I agree. All right, I've got a great. It's actually two paired questions, and they're very close to the same thing, and so important for this.
Okay.
We've got Joseph Tracy in the QA and Din Chamion on Twitter.
Yes.
The question is the balance between work and life. The exact question is, how do you have your personal brand stop in one place and your personal space begin in another, with a question about how your work-life balance works there.
Yeah.
So how do you balance the two things?
It used to be a hell of a lot more difficult. I would say when I was a little bit more into doing the Miss Destructo stuff, and I had the blue hair, and I was very highly recognizable. But sometimes it never stopped. I would go out to events, or I'd go out to networking events, and people just was like, Miss Destructo, they wanted Miss Destructo. They didn't respect, me or who I actually am. They had another kind of, idea of who I was because of my, my persona online. So I actually ran into some really interesting. I've heard other people that have personal brands run into this, but when I was dating, people, I could see that they were dating for Miss Destructo and not dating for me. They just kind of wanted to be like talked about. And I know other people that are performers and musicians, and what happens is people will either name drop or try to use your personal brand for their own gain, or even events. Sometimes events will try to swindle you over and say like, oh, well, so and so is going to be there. So
let me separate it out just a little bit more, because these are some of the issues with personal brand and personal life not being separated. But I guess the question is more kind of, how do you separate it? And
how do you separate it?
A really quick example for me. I've had some very long and very severe conversations with my husband, my co-founder, my godfather. I take Sundays off.
Yeah.
If I'm talking to you and I answer the phone on Sunday, you're my friend.
Yeah.
Maybe. So I don't do anything that day, and that's how I separate. On that day, there's nothing going on in terms of my brand. I turn people down. I won't talk because I have to have that separation. My separation is calendaric. How do you separate it?
Mine is a little bit more when I feel like I need to. There are some times like I'll just go away for a weekend, and I do the same thing. I'm like, please, if I'm answering the phone, it better be important, kind of thing. Just because you need that downtime. Some of the things that I do, I'll go to places where I can't have access to like Wi-Fi, or
I do too, yes.
It's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And I mean, just recently, my apartment got flooded, and we didn't have Wi-Fi, and that kind of forced me to not only get out of the house, but I learned that the world doesn't stop, and I felt so much better.
Yeah.
So much better.
I come back from a vacation with 400 emails waiting for me after filters.
Right.
And yet I would blast through them in an hour, and I would say to myself, why do I spend 3 hours a day on email when I can get a week's worth of email done in an hour? So I guess it's those heuristics.
Yeah. Because, I mean, what I feel that happens a lot is people think that if you're always online, like you're always going to be there. And they have expectations from you to always be there. And, I mean, you have to have a personal life. You have to go out and do things. I've had people that are like, oh, well, I saw that you just tweeted. Why haven't you responded to my tweet yet? And I'm like, it's just that. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I can't.
Well, and I don't feel like you have to apologize for that. I feel like a good answer to the questions that are being asked in a really great way here is make up your own mind about what you need it to be. But
exactly.
Be about it. Totally rigid, because this job does not just in technology. It doesn't just require.
It doesn't stop. Sometimes.
Exactly. All right, that is my kitten with attachment issue. So he's gonna probably climb on me in a second. Anyway,
it's okay.
So, got a great question here about. Okay, this is kind of a question I don't think the person realized was pretty hostile.
Okay.
So here's an interesting way to put this. I feel like a lot of people think that personal branding and marketing are something that, especially as they go and seek out new jobs, a lot of people who may be looking at this, especially later on, are going to be asking questions like, okay, I know I need to switch jobs. I've done 10 years in the same gig. Yeah. And I feel like I've got to have a network and a personal brand so that someone will come and hire me, and I just got to do this as fast as possible and deal with all that people crap until someone lets me code again. And I feel like there's this kind of underlying contempt for the creativity in a personal brand and a desire to only do it when you have to. And how do you address the notion that a lot of very technically minded people feel a great deal of contempt for the act of networking and personal branding?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because that's something I deal with some of my clients even sometimes, because they're not. They might be in an industry or like switching jobs, like you said. They might be a very technical person. They want to build a personal brand in an instant. They want it to be done in like a month or 2 months, and I'm like, okay, that's not going to happen, but let's start somewhere, because I believe your personal brand is made up of parts. So what I say is like, hey, look, let's start with your portfolio, because that's one part. That's one part of your personal brand. And then let's start with, maybe getting your portfolio out there, slowly networking with key people. I always say make a target list. If there's a certain kind of industry you want to get in, or certain people out there that you want to meet, they're all out there on Twitter or out on social networks. So it's just starting slow.
He has attachment issues. Sorry. Okay, continue.
But again, it's doing what you feel comfortable with, and not trying to jump in and do too much at once. Again, like if you're switching jobs and you kind of know the industry you want to go into, again, try to build your portfolio up, try to network as much as you possibly can. Don't try to dive into it too much, because what I see people is like crash and burn. They try to become something they're not, or they start pissing people off because they think they have to be aggressive and be in someone's face.
Well, it's related to that coffee issue, folks. There you go.
So I mean, Just start slow. I mean, I started slow. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was unemployed, and I was just kind of trying to figure things out myself. So again, telling my story though really helped, because once people were able to connect with, my story and maybe some of my goals, then people wanted to help me out. So once you start putting out there like, hey, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Some of the things that people say to me is like, I like you because you're open, you are not vulnerable, but you really have this human element to you that I can connect with. Let me help you. Let me help you fix whatever your issue is. And I really just, again, it's just starting somewhere and just trying to figure out your goals first.
Personally, I feel like the place to start for a lot of people who have this specific issue is lose the contempt.
Yeah.
Start developing a couple of relationships with people and recognize that you do not know everything, and that without the humans in your life, in your field, your colleagues, you're not anything. You don't get to work on projects without other people. You don't get to be part of this community without other people. So lose the contempt, develop the relationships, and stop feeling like networking is something that you do once every 10 years.
Yeah.
This is part of
and
character education.
I meet people that, I understand it because, sometimes I have the social anxiety of like, no, I don't want to go and network, but you have to do it. You have to make those human connections, and if you don't, then you're not gonna really go anywhere, because I mean, human connections isn't just about making friends. I mean, again, it might be a potential employer, it might be a recruiter, it might be somebody who can help you on your journey. So, and another thing I tell people, when you go and meet somebody, don't just upfront be like, I need a job, give me a job, and then be like, why haven't you gotten me a job? Try to connect with them on anything relatable that isn't about work, and then bring it up later on. So
I have a great mentor and CEO who likens it to a backpack full of colored balls. He says there are purple balls, red balls, green balls, blue balls in your backpack, and you share a color of those balls with someone else who may have different colored balls in their backpack. And these are all the likes, interests, and things that make you you. You pull stuff out of your backpack until you see, oh, we're both holding a red ball. Great, we connect on snowboarding.
Exactly. It can be the weirdest thing. When I had blue hair, people would come up to me and want to tell me their stories about like, oh, hey, this one guy in the suit, I'll never forget this. I was in Greenville, South Carolina, and I just got done doing a talk, and this gentleman in a nice business suit comes up to me, and he's like, I got to show you something. And I went, okay. But he had a full back tattoo, like beautiful, like, and he was just like, he's like, I really wish that I could still be in business and be like you are, but life happened and I had to do this, and now I kind of realize like I've become more normal, but I'm still there, and he was doing the same thing. Like, he was still there. I could see him like on the weekends doing his own thing, but when business came to business, he had to be him. He had to be professional. So I've had just some interesting stories that people are just like they'll find the commonalities. Like, go and find the commonality with somebody, and don't be shy about it either. Just be like, hey, you have really cool shoes.
All right, so it looks like we've gotten all of the questions answered we have time for today. We've got more. Good God, you're awesome for answering all of those, especially the extreme hardballs about.
Oh, that was nothing. I thought they were going to ask me about like foreign politics or something. I was like, oh, great.
So, if you have one last sentence to leave everybody with about how to build your personal brand, what would it be?
It would definitely have to be on the way of Bill and Ted. Be excellent to each other. Because seriously, like, that's what it breaks down to. Online, offline, just be excellent to each other, and you'll eventually make it.
That is wonderful. Thank you so very much, Amber Osborne, CMO of Meshfire, Miss Destructo. This was a wonderful conversation, and I would absolutely love it if you all tuned in next week. On the 28th, we are holding the very next special edition of DEF CON Unlocked. This is the Call for Proposals edition. You get to ask and get your questions answered by something like 10 of the greatest hackers in the world. They're extraordinary. They're going to help you, especially if you are a female or minority, feel comfortable about proposing to DEF CON, the biggest hacker conference in the world. We'll love having you there next week, and I will talk to you all very soon. Thank you so much again, Amber.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.